He never knew he had twin daughters, until one needed his rare blood to live. Mr. Smith, according to the DNA analysis, you're not just a blood match. You're her biological father. The words shattered Jake's world in an instant. Sitting in that sterile hospital room, staring at the social worker's sympathetic face, he felt everything he thought he knew about his life crumble away. Jake's hands trembled as he stared at Mrs. Patterson, the social worker whose gentle eyes had just delivered the most impossible news of his life. "That's not possible," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the hum of hospital machinery in the distance. "I would have known. Emma would have told me." Dr. Carter leaned forward, his expression grave but compassionate. "Mr. Smith, I understand this is overwhelming. But the genetic markers don't lie. You share 50% of your DNA with the patient upstairs." The patient? His daughter. The words felt foreign in his mind, like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that didn't seem to fit any picture he'd ever imagined. "Emma Rodriguez," Mrs. Patterson repeated softly, opening a manila folder that seemed to contain his entire future. The birth mother's name was Emma Rodriguez. "Does that mean anything to you?" Jake's breath caught. "Rodriguez? No, her name was Williams. Emma Williams. We lived together for 2 years, but that ended 13 years ago when she—" He stopped, the memory still raw after all this time. "When she disappeared without any explanation." Birth mothers sometimes use different surnames to protect their privacy during the adoption process, Mrs. Patterson explained carefully. "According to our records, Emma gave birth to twin girls on March 15, 12 years ago. Both children were placed for adoption immediately after her death." Twin girls. The room spun slightly and Jake gripped the edge of his chair. Not just one daughter but two. Two children who'd been living and breathing and growing up without him for 12 years while he'd had no idea they existed. "Where's the other one?" he asked urgently, his voice growing stronger with each word. "The twin? Rose is in foster care. She's been visiting Lily every day since the diagnosis. The girls were separated when their adoptive parents died in a car accident 2 years ago." Mrs. Patterson's voice carried the weight of too many broken families, too many children lost in a system that seemed designed to fail them. Jake closed his eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what he was learning. Emma had been pregnant when she vanished. Pregnant with his children. While he'd been wondering why she'd stopped returning his calls, why she'd moved out of their shared apartment without a word, she'd been carrying twins. Why didn't she tell me? The question escaped before he could stop it, raw and desperate. Mrs. Patterson exchanged a meaningful glance with Dr. Carter before continuing. "Mr. Smith, there's more to this story. According to the adoption records, Emma didn't make the decision to place the children herself." "What do you mean?" "Welcome to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, where every story carries the power to transform hearts and inspire souls. Please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change your perspective on life and love. Your support means everything to this channel. Now, let's get back to the story." Emma died from complications during an emergency C-section. She was alone at the hospital, having given a false name and address. But after her death, her parents came forward to claim the babies. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. Her parents. Emma's father and mother, Robert and Margaret. They're the ones who signed the adoption papers. They told the agency that Emma was unmarried and that the father was unknown. The words landed like physical blows, each one more devastating than the last. Unknown? They told the agency the father was unknown. Yes. They claimed Emma had never revealed the identity of the baby's father, and they wanted the children placed immediately for adoption. Jake's mind raced back to his relationship with Emma, to the tension he'd sensed whenever she mentioned her family. She'd been evasive about introducing him to her parents, always making excuses about timing or their busy schedules. He'd assumed they were overprotective, maybe old-fashioned about their daughter living with a boyfriend. "They knew about me," he said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "Emma's parents knew exactly who I was." Mrs. Patterson nodded grimly. "We believe so, yes. The adoption agency has since discovered some irregularities in how the case was handled. It appears Emma's parents may have deliberately withheld information about you to expedite the adoption process. They stole my children." The words came out flat, emotionless, but underneath Jake felt a rage building that threatened to consume everything in its path. "Mr. Smith, I know this is difficult to process." "Difficult?" Jake stood abruptly, pacing to the small window that overlooked the hospital parking lot. "These people, Emma's parents, they knew she was carrying my children. They knew I existed, and they chose to let my daughters grow up as orphans rather than tell me about them. Dr. Carter cleared his throat diplomatically. What matters now is that Lily needs that transfusion within the next 36 hours. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly. The medical urgency snapped Jake back to the present. Somewhere upstairs, a 12-year-old girl, his daughter, was fighting for her life. A daughter who didn't even know he existed, who'd been suffering while her grandparents lived their lives free from the consequences of their choices. I need to see her, he said, turning back to face them. Before the transfusion. I need to see Lily. Mrs. Patterson nodded. Of course. But Mr. Smith, there's something else you should know. Rose has been asking about her biological parents for months. She's incredibly mature for her age, had to grow up fast after losing her adoptive family. She's been researching, trying to find any information about where she and Lily came from. Jake felt a strange mix of pride and heartbreak. His daughters, had been looking for him while Emma's parents had made sure he could never find them. Do they know? He asked. Emma's parents, do they know I've been found? Not yet. The hospital contacted you directly through the blood donor registry. But Mr. Smith. Mrs. Patterson hesitated. If you proceed with claiming custody of the girls, Emma's parents will likely be notified as part of the legal process. Good, Jake said, his voice hard with determination. Let them know. Let them explain to a judge why they thought it was better for my daughters to suffer in the system than to be raised by their biological father. The elevator ride to the pediatric ICU felt endless. Jake's reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors, a 38-year-old paramedic who thought he understood injustice from his work in emergency medicine. Nothing had prepared him for this personal betrayal, this systematic theft of his family by people who'd claimed moral authority. The ICU was a maze of beeping monitors and hushed conversations. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency between rooms filled with small patients and worried families. Jake followed Dr. Carter down the corridor, his heart hammering against his ribs with each step, but now his grief was mixed with something else. She's in room 314, Dr. Carter said, pausing outside a door marked with cheerful cartoon stickers that seemed absurdly optimistic given the circumstances. Take your time. Jake stepped inside and felt his world shift completely. But this time, along with the overwhelming love for the daughter he'd never known, came something else. An unshakable determination to make sure the people who'd stolen her from him would never hurt his family again. Have you ever discovered that the people who hurt you most were the ones who claimed to be protecting everyone else? Drop a comment about standing up to those who abuse their authority, because sometimes the most righteous battles are fought against the most self-righteous enemies. Jake stood frozen in the doorway of room 314, staring at the small figure in the hospital bed. Lily lay unconscious, her dark hair spread across the pillow like Emma's used to when she slept beside him. But seeing his daughter's face, so clearly his own features mixed with Emma's, brought everything rushing back with devastating clarity. Emma hadn't abandoned him. She'd been forced away. The memory that had haunted him for 13 years suddenly made perfect sense. That last conversation they'd had, the one he'd replayed 1,000 times, searching for clues about what had gone wrong. Jake, I need to tell you something, Emma had said, sitting on their couch with her hands twisted in her lap. She'd looked pale, nervous, like she was carrying a weight too heavy for her shoulders. What is it? He'd asked, settling beside her, reaching for her hand. But before she could speak, her phone had rung. The caller ID showed Dad, and Emma's face had gone white with fear. I have to take this, she'd whispered, stepping into their bedroom and closing the door. Jake had heard raised voices through the thin walls, Emma's pleading tone mixed with a man's harsh demands. When she'd emerged 20 minutes later, her eyes were red from crying. I can't do this anymore, she'd said, not meeting his gaze. We want different things, Jake. It's better if we end this now. Emma, what are you talking about? Yesterday you were talking about moving in together permanently. What changed? Nothing changed. I realized we're not compatible. The words had felt rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. But Jake had been too hurt, too confused to push harder for the truth. Now, standing beside his daughter's hospital bed, he understood. Emma had been trying to tell him she was pregnant. Her father's phone call had stopped her, and whatever Robert Rodriguez had said during that conversation had terrified her into silence. Jake pulled out his phone and called Mrs. Patterson. I need to know more about Emma's parents, he said without preamble when she answered. Everything you can tell me. Mr. Smith, are you all right? You sound. I'm angry. I'm standing next to my dying daughter, and I just realized that 13 years ago, her grandparents scared Emma into hiding her pregnancy from me. I need to know who I'm dealing with. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a moment. I can share what's in the adoption file. Robert and Margaret Rodriguez, both in their 70s now. Robert is a retired minister, Margaret was a church secretary. They belong to the Sacred Light Baptist Church in Riverside. A minister. Of course. Jake could practically write the script himself. Their daughter living in sin with a man they'd never approved of, the shame of an unmarried pregnancy, the need to protect their reputation in their religious community. What else? According to the records, they told the adoption agency that Emma had been involved with multiple men and couldn't identify the father. They painted her as troubled, promiscuous. Jake's grip tightened on the phone. They destroyed her reputation to cover up their own prejudice. It appears so. Mr. Smith, there's something else. I made some calls after our meeting. Robert and Margaret Rodriguez are still alive. They still live in Riverside, still attend the same church. Do they know about the girl's medical situation? About Lily being in the hospital? No. The adoption was closed, and the girl's adoptive parents never had contact with the birth family. As far as the Rodriguezes know, the twins disappeared into the system 12 years ago. Jake looked down at Lily's peaceful face, then at the machines keeping her stable. They've been living their lives for 12 years, probably telling themselves they did the right thing, while their granddaughters suffered. After ending the call, Jake sat in the chair beside Lily's bed and tried to piece together the full picture of what had happened 13 years ago. Emma, young and scared, discovering she was pregnant and wanting to tell him. Her parents, horrified by the prospect of their unmarried daughter having children with a man they deemed unsuitable. The pressure they must have put on her to cut contact, to hide the pregnancy, to protect their standing in their religious community. And Emma, caught between the man she loved and the parents who'd raised her to obey without question, had chosen the path that seemed to cause the least immediate pain. She'd probably told herself she was protecting Jake from her parents' wrath, never imagining that her choice would rob him of 12 years with his daughters. The door opened quietly and Jake turned to see a girl standing in the entrance. 12 years old, wearing a school uniform that had seen better days, carrying a backpack that looked too heavy for her thin shoulders. But it was her eyes that stopped his heart, green eyes, exactly like his own, staring back at him from a face that was both completely foreign and utterly familiar. "You must be Rose," he said softly. She nodded, stepping into the room with the careful movements of someone who'd spent too much time in hospitals. "Mrs. Patterson told me you're our father. Our biological father." The word father hung in the air between them, heavy with 13 years of absence and a lifetime of questions. "Yes," Jake said simply. "I am. And I just found out about you and Lily today." Rose studied his face with the same intense scrutiny he'd seen in the mirror his entire life. She was looking for truth, for sincerity, for some sign that he could be trusted. "You really didn't know about us?" she asked. "I had no idea you existed. If I had known." Jake's voice caught. "Rose, if I had known about you girls, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you." "Then why didn't our mother tell you?" The question he'd been dreading. How did you explain to a 12-year-old that her grandparents had been so prejudiced, so concerned with their own reputation, that they'd forced her mother to hide her pregnancy? "It's complicated," Jake said carefully. "Your mother wanted to tell me, but her parents, your grandparents, they didn't approve of me. They convinced her to keep the pregnancy secret." Rose's expression sharpened. "Our grandparents are alive?" "Yes. They're the ones who gave you and Lily up for adoption after your mother died. They knew about you? They knew we had a father who might want us." Jake nodded, watching Rose process this information with the analytical mind that reminded him so much of himself. "So they chose to let us go into the system rather than tell you about us," Rose said slowly. "That's exactly what they did." Rose was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving between Jake and her unconscious sister. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but Jake could hear the anger underneath. "They let Lily get sick. They let us get separated when our adoptive parents died. They let me spend months trying to take care of her alone, not knowing if she was going to die." Rose looked directly at Jake. "All because they didn't think you were good enough for our mother?" "I'm afraid so." "What kind of people do that to children? To their own grandchildren?" Jake saw his own fury reflected in his daughter's eyes, and for the first time since learning about Emma's parents, he felt something other than rage. He felt pride. This 12-year-old girl had more moral clarity than the adults who'd claimed to be protecting her. "The kind of people who care more about their reputation than their family," Jake said. "But Rose, they don't get to make decisions about your life anymore. I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere." Rose moved closer to Lily's bedside, automatically checking the 4-line and adjusting the blanket with practiced ease. Are you going to fight them? When they find out you've found us. If they want a fight, they'll get one. But Rose, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with your grandparents, whatever legal battles we might face, you and Lily are my daughters. Nothing they say or do can change that. Rose looked up at him with those familiar eyes. Promise? I promise. And Rose? I'm going to make sure they never hurt you or Lily again. The transfusion room hummed with quiet efficiency as nurses prepared the equipment that would save his daughter's life. Jake settled into the donation chair, watching Rose position herself beside Lily's bed with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent countless hours keeping vigil in hospital rooms. This will take approximately 3 hours, Dr. Carter explained, checking Jake's blood pressure one final time. We'll monitor both you and Lily throughout the process. Her body should begin responding to the new blood within the first hour. As the needle slid into his arm and his blood began flowing through clear tubing toward his daughter, Jake found himself studying every detail of Lily's face. Even unconscious, even pale and fragile, she was unmistakably his child. The stubborn set of her chin, the shape of her hands, the way her eyebrows drew together slightly as if she was concentrating on something important even in sleep. 12 years. 12 years of this beautiful girl's life stolen from him by people who'd claimed to know what was best for everyone. Tell me about her, Jake said to Rose, who was updating her careful medical notes. What's Lily like when she's not sick? Rose's expression softened as she looked at her twin sister. She's funny. Really funny, but in this quiet way that sneaks up on you. She'll say something that seems normal, and then you realize she just made the most perfect joke. What else? She draws constantly. She covered the walls with her artwork. The Foster families usually make her take it down, but she keeps drawing anyway. Rose pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack. She drew this last week. Jake looked at the drawing, a detailed sketch of 2 girls holding hands, standing in front of a house with smoke coming from the chimney and flowers in the yard. At the bottom, in careful lettering, Lily had written, "Someday." She draws the same thing over and over, Rose explained. A house where we belong. She's been drawing versions of this since we were little. Jake felt his chest tighten with emotion. While he'd been living his comfortable life, unaware of their existence, his daughters had been dreaming of the home he could have given them all along. Rose, can I ask you something difficult? She nodded, her pen poised over her notebook. Do you remember anything about your grandparents? About Emma's parents? Rose's expression grew guarded. Not really. We were babies when we were adopted. But... She hesitated. There was something the social worker said once when we were being placed. She mentioned that our birth mother's family had been very specific about wanting a good Christian home for us. Specific how? They had a whole list of requirements. The adoptive parents had to be married, had to attend church regularly, had to promise to raise us with proper moral values. Rose's voice carried a note of bitter irony. They were very concerned about our spiritual welfare. Jake's anger flared fresh. Robert and Margaret Rodriguez had been so worried about their granddaughter's moral upbringing that they'd ensured the girls would grow up as orphans, bouncing between foster homes and struggling with medical crises alone. The Carters were good people, Rose continued. They really tried to be good parents to us. But when they died... She trailed off, her attention returning to Lily's monitors. What happened after they died? The system tried to keep us together, but it's hard to place 2 kids at once, especially when one has medical issues. We got separated for 8 months before I convinced them to let me visit Lily regularly. Rose's voice grew stronger. I told them I was the only family she had left, and if they didn't let me see her, I'd run away and find her myself. The fierce protectiveness in Rose's voice reminded Jake of Emma, the way she'd fought for the things she believed in, the way she'd never backed down when something mattered to her. You've been taking care of her all this time. Someone had to. The Foster families mean well, but they don't understand Lily's condition. They don't know how to read the signs when she's getting worse. Rose looked up from her notes. I've been keeping track of everything, her symptoms, her medications, what helps and what doesn't. The doctors don't always listen to kids, but they have to listen to family. Jake watched his blood flow through the tubes toward Lily, carrying life and hope to the daughter who'd been fighting alone for so long. Rose, I need you to know something. What your grandparents did, keeping you from me, it wasn't about protecting you. It was about protecting themselves. What do you mean? They were more concerned with their reputation in their church community than they were with your welfare. They couldn't handle the shame of having an unmarried daughter, so they erased me from the story entirely. Rose processed this information with her usual careful analysis. So they let us suffer to save face? That's exactly what they did. And they're still out there? Living their lives like nothing happened? Jake nodded. Still attending the same church, probably still telling themselves they did the right thing. Rose was quiet for several minutes, her pen moving across the pages of her notebook. When she looked up again, her eyes blazed with an anger that matched his own. They don't get to do that, she said firmly. They don't get to destroy our family and then pretend they're good people. No, they don't. And when this is over, when Lily is better, we're going to make sure they face the consequences of their choices. What kind of consequences? Legal ones. Moral ones. I'm going to make sure everyone in their precious church community knows exactly what kind of people they really are. Dr. Carter approached to check the transfusion progress. Everything looks excellent, Mr. Smith. Lily's blood oxygen levels are already improving significantly. As if responding to the doctor's words, Lily stirred slightly in her bed. Her eyelids fluttered, and she made a small sound that brought Rose to her feet instantly. Lily? Rose was beside the bed immediately, taking her sister's hand. Lily, can you hear me? Lily's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing as she took in her surroundings. Her gaze moved from Rose to the unfamiliar man in the donation chair connected to her by tubes and wires. Rose? Lily's voice was barely a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound Jake had ever heard. I'm here, Lil. I'm right here. Rose squeezed her sister's hand gently. How do you feel? Better. Different. Lily's eyes found Jake again. Who is that? Rose looked at Jake, then back at her sister. Lily, this is our father. Our biological father. He's giving you blood to help you get better. Lily studied Jake with the same intense scrutiny Rose had shown earlier. Even weak and recovering, she had an alertness that reminded him of Emma's quick intelligence. Our real father? She asked. Yes, Jake said softly. I'm your dad, Lily. I just found out about you and Rose today, but I'm here now. Lily considered this information with the seriousness of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. Where have you been? The question was so direct, so innocent, that Jake felt his throat tighten. I've been here the whole time, sweetheart. I just didn't know about you. Your mother's parents made sure I never found out you existed. Why would they do that? Because they cared more about themselves than they cared about you and Rose. Lily was quiet for a moment, then looked at the tubes connecting them. Your blood is helping me? Yes. We have the same rare blood type. That's how the doctors found me. Lily smiled for the first time since waking up, a small, tentative smile that transformed her entire face. So we're really related? Not just adopted related, but actually related. Yes, sweetheart. You and Rose are my daughters. I always wondered what our real parents were like, Lily said, her voice growing stronger. Rose has been trying to find you. Jake looked at Rose, who blushed slightly. I never thought you'd literally walk into a hospital to save Lily's life. I would have walked through fire to find you both, if I'd known you existed. Lily's smile grew wider. Are you going to stay? Are you going to be our dad now? Forever, Jake promised. No one is ever going to separate us again. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as Dr. Carter reviewed Lily's overnight blood work with obvious satisfaction. Jake had dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable hospital chair, waking every hour to check on both girls. Rose had slept curled on the small couch, but even in sleep she'd maintained her protective vigilance, stirring whenever Lily moved or coughed. These numbers are remarkable, Dr. Carter announced, showing Jake the lab results on his tablet. Lily's red blood cell count has improved dramatically. Her hemoglobin levels are approaching normal range for the first time in months. Lily sat up in bed, looking more alert and energetic than she had since Jake first saw her. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes held a brightness that spoke of genuine recovery rather than temporary improvement. Does this mean I can go home today? She asked hopefully. I want to run one more set of labs this afternoon, but if they continue trending upward, I see no reason to keep you here another night. Rose looked up from her notebook where she'd been recording the morning's vital signs. What about follow-up care? Medications? When do we need to come back? Jake marveled at Rose's thoroughness. She'd been functioning as Lily's medical advocate for months, asking the right questions and ensuring nothing fell through the cracks. We'll want to see Lily back in 2 weeks for blood work, then monthly for the next 6 months, Dr. Carter explained. But given how well she's responding to the transfusion, I'm optimistic this could be a turning point in managing her condition. After Dr. Carter left to continue his rounds, Jake found himself alone with both daughters for the first time since the crisis began. The morning sunlight streaming through the hospital windows made the room feel less clinical, more like a place where families gathered rather than where medical emergencies unfolded. "Rose," Jake said carefully, "I need to ask you something important. What's your living situation like right now? With the foster family?" Rose's expression grew guarded. "They're fine. The Hendersons. They have 3 other foster kids, so it's pretty crowded, but they're not mean or anything. Do you feel safe there?" "Safe enough. Mrs. Henderson makes sure we do our homework and eat dinner. Mr. Henderson mostly watches TV and doesn't bother anyone." Rose's tone was matter-of-fact, describing a situation that was adequate but far from ideal. "What about school? Are you able to keep up with your classes while spending so much time here?" "I do my homework in Lily's room after visiting hours. The teachers know about the situation, so they're pretty understanding when I'm late or miss assignments." Jake felt a surge of admiration mixed with concern. This 12-year-old had been juggling school, foster care, and her sister's medical crisis with remarkable maturity, but the strain was evident in the dark circles under her eyes and the careful way she measured every word. "Rose, I want you to know that's all going to change now. You won't have to handle this alone anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm going to start the process to get emergency custody of both of you. You shouldn't be in foster care when you have a biological father who wants you." Rose's eyes widened. "Is that even possible? Can you just take us?" "It's complicated, but yes. I've already spoken with a family attorney this morning. Given the medical emergency and the DNA evidence, we can file for emergency custody while we work through the formal adoption process." Lily had been listening quietly to this conversation, but now she spoke up. "What about your wife, Naomi? Are you sure she really wants us?" Jake pulled out his phone, scrolling to the text messages Naomi had sent throughout the night. "Let me read you what she wrote at 2 in the morning. Jake, I can't sleep thinking about those girls. Rose sounds incredible and I can't wait to meet them both. Tommy keeps asking when his new sisters are coming home. We're going to need bunk beds and probably a bigger dining table, but we'll figure it out. Bring them home as soon as the doctors say it's safe." Rose and Lily exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that only twins could share. "She really said that?" Rose asked. "She really did. And this morning she texted that she's already cleared out the spare room and gone shopping for things you might need." "What kind of things?" Lily asked curiously. Jake scrolled through more messages. "Clothes in your sizes, school supplies, books, something called fuzzy socks that she says are essential for recovery, and apparently enough snacks to feed a small army." For the first time since he'd met her, Rose laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that transformed her serious face. "Fuzzy socks. Naomi believes fuzzy socks can cure almost anything. She bought Tommy 12 pairs when he had the flu last winter." "What's Tommy like?" Lily asked. "Will he really want big sisters?" Jake smiled, thinking of his energetic 6-year-old. "Tommy has been asking for siblings since he learned to talk. He's going to be over the moon. Fair warning though, he's going to want to show you everything he owns, teach you all his favorite games and probably follow you around like a puppy for the first few weeks." "That sounds nice," Rose said quietly. "I've always wondered what it would be like to have a little brother. He's going to adore you both. Tommy has this way of making everyone feel special and wanted." A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Mrs. Patterson, the social worker, entered with a clipboard and the slightly harried expression of someone managing multiple complex cases. "Good morning, everyone. Lily, you're looking much better today." "I feel much better," Lily confirmed. Mrs. Patterson turned to Jake. "Mr. Smith, I've been reviewing your petition for emergency custody. Given the circumstances and your biological relationship to the girls, I think we can expedite the process significantly." "What does that mean exactly?" Rose asked. "It means that instead of waiting weeks or months for court hearings, we can have a judge review your case within the next few days. If approved, you could be placed with your father while we work through the formal adoption proceedings." Rose looked skeptical. "And if it's not approved?" "Then we continue with the current arrangements until the full adoption process is complete." But honestly, Rose, cases like this, where a biological parent steps forward and demonstrates both the means and desire to care for their children, these usually go smoothly. Jake could see Rose processing this information, weighing possibilities and potential disappointments with the caution of someone who'd learned not to get her hopes up too quickly. "What would we need to do?" she asked. "There will be a home study, background checks, interviews with all family members. Standard procedure to ensure the placement is in your best interests." "When would this happen?" Lily asked. If Dr. Carter clears you for discharge today, we could potentially have you placed with your father by the end of the week. The room fell silent as both girls absorbed this timeline. Jake watched their faces, seeing hope warring with disbelief. Rose, he said gently, I know this is a lot to process. You've been taking care of yourself and Lily for so long that trusting adults probably doesn't come easily. Rose nodded slowly. Every time someone promises things will get better, something goes wrong. Our adoptive parents died. Foster placements fall through. Lily gets sicker. I understand why you'd be cautious. But Rose, I'm not going anywhere. Even if the custody process takes longer than expected, even if there are complications, I'm your father and I'm going to fight for you both. What if our grandparents find out? Rose asked suddenly. What if they try to stop you from taking us? Jake's expression hardened. Let them try. I'd love to see them explain to a judge why they thought it was better for you to suffer in the system than to be raised by your biological father. Promise? Lily asked, her voice small. I promise. And girls, I want you both to know something. You don't have to earn your place in our family. You don't have to be perfect or grateful or easy to manage. You belong with us because you're my daughters, period. Rose's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. No one's ever said that to us before. Well, get used to hearing it because it's true. Mrs. Patterson smiled at the family tableau before her. I'll start the paperwork immediately. With any luck, we'll have you all together very soon. And if our grandparents try to interfere? Rose pressed. Jake's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. Then they'll discover that some fights aren't worth picking. Especially when they're fighting someone who actually loves you. Thursday afternoon brought the news Jake had been hoping for. Dr. Carter discharged Lily with a clean bill of health and strict instructions for follow-up care. As they gathered her few belongings from the hospital room, Jake felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. His daughters were coming home with him today, but he knew the real battle was just beginning. The drive to the courthouse for the emergency custody hearing took 20 minutes through suburban streets that would soon become familiar to Rose and Lily. Jake watched them in the rearview mirror, taking in their new surroundings with the careful attention of people who'd learned not to get too comfortable anywhere. That's the library where Naomi volunteers, Jake pointed out as they passed a brick building with large windows. She's going to want to get you both library cards immediately. I love libraries, Lily said softly. They're quiet and safe. Naomi says the same thing. You two are going to get along perfectly. The courthouse was busier than Jake had expected, filled with families navigating various legal proceedings. As they waited in the hallway outside Judge Martinez's courtroom, Rose sat with her notebook open, writing with the focused intensity she brought to everything important. What are you working on? Jake asked. A list of questions the judge might ask us. I want to be prepared. Jake looked at the neat handwriting filling the page, thoughtful questions about their living situation, their relationship with him, their feelings about the placement. This 12-year-old was approaching the hearing with the strategic thinking of an experienced attorney. Rose, you don't have to have all the answers. The judge just wants to make sure this is what you want. It is what we want, Rose said firmly. But I've learned that wanting something isn't enough. You have to be able to prove you deserve it. The casual way she said it broke Jake's heart. These girls had been conditioned to believe they had to earn basic love and security, that family was something you qualified for rather than something you simply belonged to. Mr. Smith? A bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. Judge Martinez will see you now. The courtroom was smaller than Jake had expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic legal setting he'd seen in movies. Judge Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, reviewed the paperwork spread across her desk. This is quite an unusual case, she began, looking up at Jake and the girls. Emergency custody based on a medical emergency that revealed paternity. I've read through all the documentation, including the DNA test results and the social worker's report. Jake felt his heart racing. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Rose and Lily, Judge Martinez addressed the girls directly, I understand you've been through a great deal in your young lives. How do you feel about the possibility of living with Mr. Smith? Rose straightened in her chair, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, Jake is our biological father, and he's shown us more care in the past 3 days than most adults have in years. He saved Lily's life and he's promised we can stay together. And you, Lily? How do you feel? Lily looked at Jake, then back at the judge. I feel safe with him. And his family wants us. His wife sent me fuzzy socks. She said this last part as if it were the most compelling evidence possible. Judge Martinez smiled slightly. Fuzzy socks are indeed a sign of serious commitment. Mr. Smith, I've reviewed your background check, your employment history, and the preliminary home study report. Everything appears to be in order. Jake held his breath. However, Judge Martinez continued, I've also received some concerning correspondence this morning. Jake's stomach dropped. What kind of correspondence? A letter from Robert and Margaret Rodriguez, claiming to be the girl's grandparents. They're requesting that the court delay this proceeding pending their own petition for custody. The words landed like a physical blow. Somehow, Emma's parents had found out about the hearing. Your Honor, Jake said, fighting to keep his voice steady, Robert and Margaret Rodriguez are the people who gave these children up for adoption 12 years ago. They told the adoption agency that the father was unknown, deliberately hiding my existence to prevent me from claiming my daughters. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Smith. It's a provable allegation. I have documentation showing that Emma Rodriguez, their daughter, was living with me when she became pregnant. They knew exactly who I was, and they chose to let my children grow up as orphans rather than contact me. Rose had gone very still beside him, her notebook forgotten in her lap. They want us now? She asked quietly. Judge Martinez consulted her papers. According to their letter, they claim they were unaware that you girls were in the foster care system. They state that if they had known about your circumstances, they would have stepped forward sooner. That's a lie, Rose said, her voice sharp with anger. They knew exactly what happened to us. The adoption agency would have contacted them when our adoptive parents died. Rose is correct, Jake added. The Rodriguezes have been living their lives for 12 years, probably telling themselves they did the right thing while their granddaughters suffered. Now that there's media attention around this case, suddenly they want to play the concerned grandparents. Judge Martinez studied the letter again. Mr. Rodriguez claims that as practicing Christians, they can provide a more stable, morally grounded environment for the children. Jake felt his temper flare. Your Honor, these are the same practicing Christians who thought it was morally acceptable to lie about their granddaughter's paternity and condemn them to a life in the foster care system. Dad, Lily said suddenly, the word carrying clearly across the quiet courtroom. We don't want to live with them. We want to stay with you. The simple declaration seemed to cut through all the legal complexity. Judge Martinez looked at both girls carefully. Rose, Lily, do you understand what your grandparents are requesting? Yes, Rose said firmly. They want to take us away from our father because they think they know better than we do about what's good for us. Just like they thought they knew better than our mother 13 years ago. Judge Martinez was quiet for a long moment, reviewing the papers before her. Finally she looked up. I'm going to grant temporary emergency custody to Mr. Smith, effective immediately. However, given the grandparents' petition, we'll need a full hearing within 2 weeks to resolve this matter permanently. Jake felt relief and dread in equal measure. They'd won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. Your Honor, Rose said, standing up, may I say something? You may. Our grandparents had 12 years to be part of our lives. They chose not to be. They don't get to change their minds now just because it's convenient for them. Judge Martinez nodded slowly. That's exactly what we'll be determining at the full hearing. Mr. Smith, you have temporary custody. Use this time wisely. As they left the courthouse, Jake's phone was already ringing. The battle for his daughters had officially begun. The drive home from the courthouse was tense with anticipation. Jake gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his mind racing through legal strategies while Rose and Lily sat quietly in the back seat, processing the reality that their grandparents, people they'd never met, were trying to claim them. Dad, Rose said suddenly, breaking the silence. What are they like? Our grandparents. Jake glanced at them in the rearview mirror. I only met them once, very briefly, when your mother and I first started dating. They seemed... He searched for diplomatic words. Very concerned with appearances. Very focused on what other people thought. Did they not like you? Lily asked. They made it clear I wasn't what they had in mind for Emma's future. Why not? Jake considered how much to tell them. I think they had very specific ideas about the kind of man their daughter should marry. I didn't fit their picture. Rose's analytical mind was already working. So when Mom got pregnant, they saw it as proof they were right about you. Something like that. And now they want us because having grandchildren makes them look good, Lily said with surprising insight for a 12-year-old. I think that's exactly right. As they turned onto Jake Street, both girls pressed their faces to the windows, taking in the tree-lined neighborhood with its well-maintained houses and children's bicycles scattered on front lawns. It was the kind of place they'd probably dreamed about during their years in foster care, stable, safe, permanent. That's our house, Jake said, pulling into the driveway of a two-story colonial with blue shutters and a front porch swing. Before they could even get out of the car, the front door burst open and Tommy came racing down the driveway, his 6-year-old energy barely contained by his small body. "Are these my sisters?" he called out, bouncing on his toes as Jake opened the car doors. "Tommy, remember what we talked about?" Naomi said, following at a more measured pace. "Let them get out of the car first." But Rose and Lily were already smiling at Tommy's enthusiasm. His joy was infectious, uncomplicated by the adult concerns that had dominated their lives for so long. "I'm Tommy," he announced proudly. "I'm 6 3/4 and I've been waiting my whole life for big sisters. I'm Rose and this is Lily. We're 12. Both of you? At the same time?" "We're twins," Lily explained. Tommy's eyes widened as if this was the most amazing thing he'd ever heard. "That's so cool. Can you read each other's minds? Do you feel it when the other one gets hurt?" Rose laughed, the second time Jake had heard that wonderful sound. "Not exactly, but we do know when something's wrong with the other one." Naomi approached more slowly, giving the girl space to adjust. She was exactly as Jake had described her, warm brown eyes, an easy smile, and an aura of calm competence that made people feel immediately welcome. "Rose, Lily, I'm so glad you're here," she said simply. "I know this is all very new and probably overwhelming, but we're going to take everything one day at a time." "Thank you for the fuzzy socks," Lily said shyly. "They're really soft. I'm glad you like them. I have a theory that fuzzy socks make everything better." "Can I show them my room?" Tommy asked eagerly. "And the backyard? And my rock collection?" "Let them get settled first," Naomi suggested gently. "Maybe after dinner you can give them the grand tour." As they walked toward the house, Jake's phone rang. The caller ID showed his attorney's number. "I need to take this," he told Naomi. "Can you help the girls get settled?" "Of course. Come on, let's see your new room." Jake stepped aside to answer the call, watching his family, his complete family, disappear into the house together. "Jake, we have a problem," his attorney said without preamble. "I've been doing some research on Robert and Margaret Rodriguez. They're not just filing for custody, they're claiming that your emergency placement was obtained through fraud." "What kind of fraud?" "They're alleging that you knew about the girls all along and deliberately waited until there was a medical crisis to claim them for maximum sympathy. They're painting you as an opportunist who abandoned his children and only came forward when it was convenient." Jake felt his anger spike. "That's completely false. I have documentation proving I had no knowledge of their existence." "I know that and we can prove it. But Jake, there's more. They've hired Morrison and Associates, the same firm that represents Sacred Heart Adoption Services. This isn't just about custody anymore. They're trying to discredit the entire emergency placement process." "What does that mean for the girls?" "It means we need to be prepared for a fight. They're going to argue that the girls would be better off with grandparents who can provide religious guidance and moral stability. They're going to paint your household as chaotic and unprepared." Jake looked through the front window at his family gathered in the living room. Tommy was showing Rose and Lily his prized rock collection while Naomi listened with genuine interest. The scene was so perfectly normal, so beautifully ordinary, that the idea of anyone calling it chaotic seemed absurd. "Let them try," Jake said. "Any judge who spends 5 minutes with Rose and Lily will see how happy they are here." "Jake, I need you to understand something. The Rodriguezes aren't just claiming they can provide a better home. They're claiming they have a moral obligation to save these children from what they're calling an irregular family situation." "Irregular how?" "They're questioning whether a household with an existing child can properly accommodate 2 traumatized foster children. They're suggesting that Tommy's needs will be neglected in favor of the new arrivals." Jake's grip tightened on the phone. "They're trying to turn my son against his sisters before they've even had a chance to be a family." "That's exactly what they're doing. And Jake, there's one more thing. They've requested that the girls be placed in temporary care with a neutral family during the custody proceedings." "Absolutely not. These girls have been through enough disruption. They're staying here." "I agree, but we need to be prepared for them to argue that your household is too emotionally charged for the girls to make clear decisions about their future." Jake ended the call and stood for a moment on his front porch, looking at the house that had become a sanctuary for his daughters. Through the windows, he could see Rose helping Lily unpack her few belongings while Tommy chattered about all the adventures they were going to have together. Robert and Margaret Rodriguez thought they could waltz back into his daughters' lives after 12 years of absence and claim moral superiority. They thought they could use their religious convictions as weapons to tear apart the family that was finally healing. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Jake walked back into the house to find the girls in the kitchen with Naomi, helping prepare dinner. The sight of them working together, Rose carefully chopping vegetables, Lily setting the table, Tommy explaining the proper way to fold napkins, filled him with fierce protectiveness. "How did the call go?" Naomi asked quietly. "The grandparents are playing dirty. They're not just fighting for custody, they're trying to destroy our credibility entirely." Rose looked up from her chopping. "What does that mean?" "It means they're going to try to convince a judge that you'd be better off with them than with us." "That's ridiculous," Lily said firmly. "We've been here for 3 hours and we already feel more like a family than we ever did anywhere else." "I know that and you know that. But we're going to have to prove it in court." Rose set down her knife and looked directly at Jake. "Then we'll prove it. We'll show them that love isn't about religion or rules or what other people think. It's about showing up when someone needs you." "Are you ready for that fight?" Jake asked. "We've been fighting our whole lives," Rose said simply. "At least now we're fighting for something worth having." Have you ever had to defend your right to love someone? That moment when you realize that some people will use any weapon, even faith and morality, to tear apart what you've built? The first week with Rose and Lily in their home passed in a whirlwind of school enrollment, medical appointments, and the delicate dance of 5 people learning to live together. Naomi found herself marveling at how quickly the girls had adapted to their routines, and how naturally Tommy had embraced his role as big brother despite being the youngest. But beneath the surface of domestic normalcy, tension simmered. Jake's phone rang constantly with updates from their attorney, and Naomi could see the strain in the careful way Rose monitored every conversation, ready to protect Lily from any hint that their newfound security might be temporary. "Mom, can you help me with this math problem?" Rose asked one evening, appearing in the kitchen doorway with her homework. The word "Mom" stopped Naomi mid-motion as she loaded the dishwasher. Rose had been calling her Naomi since arriving, polite but distant. This was the first time she'd used the word that Tommy took for granted. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's take a look." They settled at the kitchen table, Rose's textbook open between them. But instead of focusing on algebra, Rose seemed to be studying Naomi's face. "Can I ask you something?" Rose said quietly. "Always. Are you really okay with this? With us being here? Because I know it's not what you planned when you woke up last week." Naomi set down her pen and turned to face Rose fully. "Do you want the completely honest answer?" Rose nodded. "When Jake called me from the hospital and told me about you and Lily, my first thought wasn't about how this would change our lives. It was about how scared you both must be, and how alone you'd felt for so long." Naomi reached across the table and took Rose's hand. "My second thought was how lucky we were that you needed exactly what we had to give." "Really? Really? Rose, you and Lily didn't disrupt our family. You completed it. I just didn't know we were incomplete until you arrived." Rose's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "But what about when the legal stuff gets messy? What if our grandparents make things difficult for you and Jake and Tommy? Then we'll handle it together. That's what families do. Even if they try to make you look bad in court? Even if they say terrible things about Jake?" Naomi's expression hardened slightly. "Especially then. Rose, I've seen how you take care of Lily, how you've sacrificed your own childhood to keep her safe. I've watched Jake with you girls and I've never seen him happier or more complete. If your grandparents want to challenge that, they're going to discover that this family fights for each other." From the living room came the sound of Lily reading aloud to Tommy, her voice animated as she brought the characters in his bedtime story to life. It had become their nightly ritual, Lily's dramatic flair perfectly matched to Tommy's love of adventure stories. "She's good with him," Rose observed, following Naomi's gaze toward the living room. "They're good with each other. Tommy's never had anyone who took his interests so seriously, and Lily's never had someone who thought everything she did was amazing. What about you? Do you mind sharing Tommy with us?" The question revealed so much about Rose's careful nature, her need to ensure she wasn't taking anything away from the people who'd welcomed her. "Rose, love doesn't divide when you spread it around. It multiplies. Tommy isn't getting less attention because you and Lily are here, he's getting more love from more people. And so are all of us." Jake appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression grim. "I just got off the phone with our attorney. The Rodriguezes have filed additional motions." Naomi felt Rose tense beside her. "What kind of motions?" "They're requesting supervised visitation with the girls pending the custody hearing. They want to establish a relationship with their granddaughters." "Absolutely not," Rose said immediately. "We don't want to see them." "I know, sweetheart. But the court might require it anyway." They have legal standing as biological grandparents. Naomi watched Rose's face cycle through emotions: anger, fear, determination. What would supervised visitation mean? It means you and Lily would have to spend time with them, probably at a neutral location with a social worker present. They'd get to present their case for why you should live with them instead of us. How long would these visits last? Naomi asked. Probably an hour or two, once or twice a week until the hearing. Rose stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked their backyard. They're going to try to convince us that this isn't real. That you and Naomi are just being nice because you feel sorry for us. Is that what you're worried about? Naomi asked gently. I'm worried they'll say things that make Lily doubt whether we belong here. She's younger, more trusting. What if they convince her that we'd be better off with them? Jake joined them at the table. Rose, do you think Lily would choose to leave us? No. But I think she might choose to leave if she thought it would make things easier for everyone else. Lily always puts other people first. Naomi felt a surge of protectiveness for both girls. Then we'll make sure she knows that choosing us isn't a burden on anyone. We'll make sure she understands that we want her here not because we feel obligated, but because we love her. What if the grandparents try to use our mother against us? Rose asked. What if they say she would have wanted us to be raised by them? Jake's expression darkened. Then they'll be lying. Emma chose me, Rose. She chose to build a life with me. If she'd wanted you to be raised by her parents, she would have told me about the pregnancy and asked me to make sure that happened. But they'll say she was young and confused, that she didn't know what was best for us. And we'll say that Emma was smart and capable and perfectly able to make her own decisions about her life and her children. We'll say that her parents' disapproval of me doesn't give them the right to rewrite history. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, Tommy trailing behind her with his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Is everything okay? Lily asked, reading the tension in the room with the sensitivity of someone who'd learned to monitor adult moods for signs of danger. We're just talking about the legal stuff, Rose said, moving to stand beside her sister. Are we going to have to see them? Our grandparents? Possibly, Jake said gently. The court might require it. Lily considered this information seriously. Will you be there too? Not during the visits themselves, but we'll be right outside. And afterwards you'll come home with us. Promise? Promise? Tommy tugged on Lily's sleeve. Who are your grandparents? Are they nice like Grandma and Grandpa Smith? Lily knelt down to Tommy's level. We don't know them, Tommy. They gave us away when we were babies because they didn't want us. But now they do want you? Now they think they want us. But we already have a family. We have you and Mom and Dad. Tommy nodded solemnly as if this made perfect sense to him. Then you should stay here. This is where you belong. That's exactly right, buddy, Jake said, ruffling Tommy's hair. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, Jake and Naomi sat on their back porch, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood settling into night. Are you really ready for this fight? Jake asked. It's going to get ugly. They're going to attack everything about our family, our parenting, our values. Let them, Naomi said firmly. I've seen what we've built here in just 1 week. I've watched Rose start to trust that adults can keep their promises. I've seen Lily laugh more in 7 days than she probably did in 7 months before. I've watched Tommy become the big brother he was always meant to be. And if we lose? If the court decides the girls would be better off with their grandparents? Naomi was quiet for a moment, considering the possibility. Then we'll appeal. And if that doesn't work, we'll make sure Rose and Lily know that losing them won't be because we didn't fight hard enough. It'll be because the system failed them again. I love you, Jake said simply. I love you too. All of you. Our whole, complete, beautiful family. From upstairs came the soft murmur of Rose and Lily talking quietly before sleep, a sound that had become as familiar and comforting as any lullaby. They're going to be okay, Naomi said softly. We all are, Jake agreed. No matter what those people try to do to us. The supervised visitation order came through on a Friday afternoon, requiring Rose and Lily to meet with their grandparents the following Tuesday at the County Family Services building. Jake watched both girls process the news with the careful composure they developed over years of navigating adult decisions that affected their lives but were beyond their control. 2 hours, Rose said, reading the court document over Jake's shoulder. We have to spend 2 hours with people who threw us away. And they get to do this twice a week until the hearing? Lily asked, her voice smaller than usual. That's what the order says, Jake confirmed. But remember, there will be a social worker there the entire time. And we'll be right outside waiting for you. Rose folded the document carefully and handed it back to Jake. They're going to try to make us feel guilty for choosing you over them. Probably. And they're going to say that our mother would have wanted us to be with them. Almost certainly. And they're going to act like they're the victims in all this, like they've been searching for us for 12 years instead of hiding from us. Jake marveled at Rose's ability to anticipate manipulation tactics with the precision of someone twice her age. What are you going to do when they try those things? Tell them the truth. That we know exactly who they are and what they did, and we're not interested in their excuses. Lily looked less certain. What if they seem nice? What if they really do seem like they care about us now? Rose turned to her sister with gentle patience. Lil, people who really care about you don't wait 12 years to show it. People who really care about you don't let you suffer in foster care while they live comfortable lives pretending you don't exist. But what if they say they didn't know we were in foster care? Then they're lying. The adoption agency would have contacted them when the Carters died. They knew exactly what happened to us and they chose to do nothing. Jake watched this exchange with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Rose's protective instincts toward Lily were admirable, but no 12-year-old should have to be this sophisticated about adult deception and manipulation. Girls, he said gently, you don't have to have all the answers ready. You don't have to defend your choices to them. You just have to get through the visits until the court hearing. When is the hearing? Lily asked. 3 weeks from Monday. Judge Martinez will make the final decision about custody then. And if she decides we should live with our grandparents? Jake felt his jaw tighten. That's not going to happen. But if it does? Then we'll appeal the decision. And we'll keep appealing until we find a judge who understands that you belong with people who actually love you. That weekend, Jake and Naomi worked to create as much normalcy as possible for the girls. They took the family to the farmer's market, where Tommy insisted on buying ingredients for what he called welcome home cookies for his sisters. They visited the library where Lily checked out 6 books and Rose found a science magazine that featured an article about environmental engineering. Sunday evening brought an unexpected visitor. Jake answered the doorbell to find Mrs. Patterson standing on his front porch, her expression more serious than usual. I'm sorry to bother you at home, she said, but I thought you should know about some developments in the case. Jake invited her into the living room, where the girls were helping Tommy build an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and blankets. What kind of developments? Jake asked. The Rodriguezes have hired a private investigator to look into your background. They're also requesting character references from your neighbors, your employer, and Tommy's school. Rose looked up from the fort construction. They're trying to find dirt on Dad. It appears so. But there's more. They've also filed a motion claiming that the girls are being coached to reject them. Coached how? Naomi asked. They're alleging that you're telling Rose and Lily negative things about them to influence their decision about custody. Jake felt his temper spike. We've told them the truth about what happened 12 years ago. If that makes the Rodriguezes look bad, maybe they should have made better choices. I understand your frustration, Mr. Smith, but I wanted to warn you that they're going to use the girls' reluctance to see them as evidence of parental alienation. Rose stood up from the fort, her expression fierce. That's ridiculous. We don't want to see them because we know what they did to our mother and to us. Nobody had to tell us to feel that way. I know that, Rose. But the court will want to hear it directly from you. Good. I have plenty to say to any judge who thinks we should be grateful to the people who abandoned us. Mrs. Patterson smiled slightly at Rose's determination. There's one more thing. The Rodriguezes have requested that the girls undergo psychological evaluation to determine if they've been traumatized by their placement with you. What does that mean? Lily asked, emerging from the fort. It means a psychologist would interview you both to assess your emotional state and your feelings about living here versus living with your grandparents. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They're trying to prove that being here is harmful to the girls. That appears to be their strategy. They're arguing that the sudden change in living situation, combined with the stress of the custody battle, is causing psychological damage. But we're happier here than we've ever been, Lily protested. I know that, sweetheart. And hopefully the psychologist will see that too. After Mrs. Patterson left, the family gathered in the living room to discuss these new developments. Tommy had fallen asleep in his blanket fort, exhausted from the day's activities, leaving the adults and older children to talk freely. They're really going to try everything, aren't they? Rose said. It looks that way, Jake confirmed. What if the psychologist asks us about our life before we came here? Lily asked. What if they want to know about the foster homes and the hospitals and all the times we were scared? Then you tell them the truth, Naomi said gently. You tell them about how hard things were and how different they are now. What if they ask us about our mother? About what we think she would have wanted? Jake leaned forward in his chair. Then you tell them that your mother loved me enough to build a life with me, and that if she'd wanted you to be raised by her parents, she would have made sure that happened. Rose nodded slowly. And we tell them that people who really love you don't abandon you when things get difficult. Exactly, Dad. Lily said quietly. Are you scared? Jake considered lying, giving her the reassurance that adults usually offered children in difficult situations. But these girls had been through too much to be comforted by false promises. Yes, he said honestly. I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of people who don't know you making decisions about your future. But I'm not scared of the truth because the truth is that you belong here with us. What if the truth isn't enough? Rose asked. Then we'll make it enough. We'll fight harder, speak louder, and make sure everyone understands what's really at stake here. Lily moved from her chair to sit beside Jake on the couch. I'm scared too. But I'm not scared of them anymore. I'm just scared of having to leave you. You're not going to leave us, Jake said firmly. I don't care what they try, what lies they tell, or what games they play. You're my daughters, and you're staying right here where you belong. Rose joined them on the couch, and Naomi settled into Jake's other side. Even Tommy, still half asleep, seemed to sense the family gathering and crawled out of his fort to curl up against Naomi. Tuesday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Jake drove Rose and Lily to the County Family Services building in silence, both girls staring out the windows at the gray concrete structure that would house their first meeting with the grandparents who had shaped their lives through absence. Remember, Rose said to Lily as they walked toward the entrance, whatever they say, whatever promises they make, we know the truth about who they are. The waiting room smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Jake sat with the girls on uncomfortable plastic chairs, watching other families navigate their own crises. Supervised visits, custody exchanges, the bureaucratic machinery of fractured relationships. Mr. Smith? A social worker appeared with a clipboard. I'm Sandra Mills. I'll be supervising today's visit. Jake stood, his protective instincts flaring as he prepared to hand his daughters over to strangers. How long will this take? 2 hours as ordered by the court. The girls will be perfectly safe. Rose and Lily exchanged glances, that twin communication that had sustained them through years of uncertainty. We'll be fine, Dad, Rose said, though Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. We'll be right here when you're done, Jake promised. Ms. Mills led the girls down a sterile hallway to a conference room with large windows that allowed observation from the corridor. Jake positioned himself where he could see inside, his heart hammering as two elderly figures rose from chairs at the far end of the table. Robert Rodriguez was exactly as Jake remembered, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man accustomed to moral authority. Margaret Rodriguez stood beside him, smaller and more fragile-looking, but with the same rigid posture that spoke of unwavering certainty in her own righteousness. Through the glass, Jake watched his daughters enter the room with careful composure. Rose kept herself positioned slightly in front of Lily, that protective stance she'd perfected over years of being her sister's guardian. Rose? Lily? Margaret's voice carried through the slightly open door, trembling with what sounded like genuine emotion. Oh, my dear girls, you're so beautiful. You look just like your mother. Jake saw Rose's expression harden at the mention of Emma. We know who we look like. Robert stepped forward, his voice carrying the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to delivering sermons. Girls, we know this must be confusing for you. We know you've been told things about us that may not be entirely accurate. We haven't been told anything, Rose replied coolly. We figured out what kind of people you are all by ourselves. Margaret's face crumpled with what appeared to be genuine distress. Sweetheart, we never wanted to give you away. We were young and scared and we thought we were doing what was best for you. You thought abandoning us was what was best for us? Lily asked, her voice smaller but no less pointed than her sister's. We thought placing you with a good Christian family would give you opportunities we couldn't provide, Robert said. We were grieving your mother's death and we weren't prepared to raise 2 babies. Rose leaned forward across the table. But you were prepared to make sure our father never found out we existed. Jake watched Robert's composure slip slightly. Your mother never told us who the father was. That's a lie, Rose said flatly. She lived with him for 2 years. You knew exactly who Jake was, and you hated him because he wasn't good enough for your precious reputation. Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Rose, honey, you don't understand how complicated the situation was. Your mother was so young and she was making choices that worried us. Like choosing to love someone you didn't approve of? Like living in sin with a man who couldn't provide for her properly. Lily's voice cut through the tension. He's providing for us now. He saved my life. Robert's expression shifted, becoming more calculating. And we're grateful for that, Lily. But saving your life in a medical emergency doesn't necessarily make someone qualified to raise you permanently. More qualified than people who threw us away? Rose shot back. We didn't throw you away, Margaret protested. We made sure you were placed with a loving family who could give you everything you needed. Everything except the truth about who we were and where we came from. Jake watched Robert lean back in his chair, adopting the patient tone of someone explaining simple concepts to children. Girls, I know you're angry and I understand why. But you have to realize that the people you're living with now, they're strangers who've known you for 2 weeks. We're your family. We're your blood. Blood doesn't make family, Lily said quietly. Love makes family. And where was your love for the past 12 years? Rose added. Margaret's tears seemed to intensify. We thought about you every day. We prayed for you every night. We hoped you were happy and safe. But you never tried to find us, Rose pointed out. You never checked to see if we were actually happy and safe. The adoption was closed, Robert said. We weren't allowed to have contact. You weren't allowed, or you didn't want to risk finding out that your perfect solution wasn't so perfect after all? Jake saw Robert's mask slip further, revealing the anger underneath his grandfatherly facade. Young lady, I don't appreciate your tone. We're trying to have a civilized conversation here. Civilized? Rose stood up, her voice rising. You want to talk about civilized? Let me tell you what's not civilized. Letting your granddaughters grow up thinking they were unwanted. Letting Lily almost die in a hospital while you lived your comfortable lives pretending we didn't exist. Trying to take us away from the only people who've ever actually loved us. Rose, please sit down, Ms. Mills interjected gently. No. I'm done listening to their lies. Rose turned to face her grandparents directly. You want to know what our mother would have wanted? She would have wanted us to be with our father. She would have wanted us to be loved and protected and treated like we mattered. She would have been disgusted by what you did to us. Margaret's composure finally cracked completely. How dare you speak to us that way? We're your elders and we deserve respect. Respect is earned, Lily said, standing beside her sister. And you haven't earned ours. Robert's voice turned cold. I can see that you girls have been thoroughly poisoned against us. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Nobody poisoned us against you, Rose said. Your own actions did that. We'll see what the court has to say about that, Robert replied, his mask of grandfatherly concern completely gone now. Yes, Rose said, meeting his gaze steadily. We will. The visit ended with Margaret sobbing into her tissues and Robert making notes in a small leather journal. Jake watched his daughters walk out of that room with their heads held high, their dignity intact despite the emotional assault they just endured. How did it go? He asked as they reached the waiting room. Exactly like we expected, Rose said. They're not grandparents. They're strangers who share our DNA and think that gives them the right to control our lives. Are you okay? We're fine, Lily said, though Jake could see the strain around her eyes. But Dad? We never want to see them again. Unfortunately, you probably have to. At least until the hearing. Then we'll get through it, Rose said firmly. Because we know something they don't. What's that? We know what real love looks like. And it doesn't look anything like them. The emergency hearing to determine whether Rose and Lily should be removed from Jake's home took place on a Thursday morning that dawned gray and cold. Judge Martinez's courtroom was packed with more people than Jake had expected. His attorney, the Rodriguez's legal team, social workers, and a court-appointed child advocate who would speak for the girls' interests. Robert and Margaret Rodriguez sat at the plaintiff's table, their posture radiating the confidence of people who believed God was on their side. Margaret wore a conservative navy dress and a small gold cross, while Robert had chosen his most authoritative suit. They looked like the picture of respectable grandparents fighting for their beloved granddaughters. Jake sat with Rose and Lily at the defendant's table, watching his daughters prepare for what might be the most important conversation of their lives. Rose had her notebook open, filled with carefully organized thoughts about why they belonged with Jake. Lily wore Emma's necklace, a quiet reminder of the mother whose memory was being weaponized against them. Your Honor, the Rodriguez's attorney began, we're here today because 2 innocent children are being held hostage by their own emotions. Rose and Lily Carter have been so thoroughly indoctrinated against their loving grandparents that they can no longer think clearly about their own best interests. Judge Martinez looked skeptical. That's a serious allegation, counselor. What evidence do you have of this supposed indoctrination? The girls' complete rejection of any relationship with their grandparents, despite my client's repeated attempts to build bridges. Healthy children don't react with such hostility to loving family members unless they've been coached to do so. Jake's attorney stood. Your Honor, may I point out that these loving family members abandoned Rose and Lily 12 years ago and made no attempt to contact them until 3 weeks ago? The girl's reaction isn't the result of coaching, it's the result of understanding exactly who these people are. Objection, the Rodriguez's attorney said. My clients didn't abandon anyone. They made the difficult decision to place the children for adoption because they believed it was in the girl's best interests. After lying to the adoption agency about the identity of the biological father, Jake's attorney shot back. After deliberately preventing Mr. Smith from knowing his children existed. Judge Martinez held up her hand. I'd like to hear from the girls themselves. Rose, would you like to tell me how you feel about living with Mr. Smith? Rose stood, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, I feel safe for the first time in my life. I feel like I belong somewhere. I feel like I have parents who actually want me, not because they feel obligated, but because they love me. And how do you feel about your grandparents? I feel like they're strangers who are trying to use guilt and manipulation to control my life. They claim they love us, but love doesn't abandon people for 12 years and then suddenly reappear when it's convenient. Robert Rodriguez stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is exactly what we're talking about. No 12-year-old speaks like that naturally. She's clearly been coached to say these things. Rose turned to face him directly. Nobody coached me to say anything, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm smart enough to figure out what kind of people you are all by myself. Rose, please sit down, Judge Martinez said gently. Your Honor, may I ask Rose a question? The Rodriguez's attorney requested. You may. Rose, isn't it true that you've been told negative things about your grandparents by Mr. Smith and his family? We've been told the truth about what you did to our mother and to us. If that makes you look bad, maybe you should have made better choices. But you've never been told anything positive about them? What positive things should we have been told? That they forced our mother to hide her pregnancy? That they lied to the adoption agency? That they let us suffer in foster care while they lived comfortable lives pretending we didn't exist? The attorney tried a different approach. Rose, don't you think your mother would have wanted you to have a relationship with her parents? I think our mother would have wanted us to be with our father. If she'd wanted us to be raised by you, she would have told Jake about the pregnancy and asked him to make sure that happened. Judge Martinez turned to Lily. Lily, how do you feel about this situation? Lily stood, her hand moving instinctively to Emma's necklace. Your Honor, I almost died 3 weeks ago. I was lying in a hospital bed, and Rose was trying to take care of me all by herself because we didn't have anyone else. Then our father appeared and saved my life. And how do you feel about your grandparents? I feel like they're trying to take me away from the people who actually love me. They say they care about us, but they never tried to find us when we needed them. They only showed up when there were news cameras around. Margaret Rodriguez dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Your Honor, these children have been so poisoned against us that they can't see we're trying to help them. Help them how? Judge Martinez asked. By providing them with proper moral guidance, religious instruction, and stable family values. Rose's voice cut through the courtroom. Stable family values? Like lying? Like abandonment? Like letting children suffer to protect your reputation? Rose, Robert said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect. You will show proper respect to your elders. Respect is earned, Rose replied. And you haven't earned mine. Judge Martinez studied the papers before her, then looked up at both legal teams. I've heard enough. The motion to remove Rose and Lily from Mr. Smith's custody is denied. Jake felt relief flood through him, but Judge Martinez wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm terminating the supervised visitation order. It's clear that these visits are causing distress to the children without serving any constructive purpose. Robert Rodriguez stood again. Your Honor, we object. We have rights as grandparents. You forfeited those rights 12 years ago when you chose to hide these children from their biological father, Judge Martinez said firmly. The final custody hearing will proceed as scheduled, but until then Rose and Lily will remain with Mr. Smith. As they left the courthouse, Jake watched Robert and Margaret Rodriguez huddle with their attorney, their faces grim with the realization that their strategy had backfired spectacularly. Are we really done with them? Lily asked as they reached the parking lot. For now, Jake said. But they'll probably try something else before the final hearing. Let them try, Rose said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. Every time they open their mouths, they prove what kind of people they really are. That evening, the family celebrated with pizza and ice cream while Tommy regaled them with stories from his day at school. The normalcy of it, the ordinary chaos of a family dinner, felt precious after the morning's legal drama. "Dad," Rose said as they cleaned up the dishes, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think our mother would be proud of us? Of how we handled ourselves today?" Jake smiled, thinking of Emma's fierce independence and unwavering moral compass. "I think she would be incredibly proud. You stood up for yourselves, you told the truth, and you refused to let anyone manipulate you into betraying your own instincts. And do you think she'd be happy that we chose you? I think she'd be relieved that you found your way to where you belong." Lily joined them at the sink, drying dishes with the careful attention she brought to everything important. "I think she's watching over us, making sure we stay together." "I think so too," Jake agreed. "Good," Rose said, hanging up the dish towel. "Because we're going to need all the help we can get for the final hearing. Are you worried about it?" "No," Rose said simply. "We know who we are, and we know where we belong. That's all any judge needs to see." 3 weeks after the emergency hearing victory, life in the Smith household had settled into rhythms that felt both new and eternal. Rose had joined the school's debate team, where her ability to dismantle weak arguments with surgical precision made her a formidable opponent. Lily had auditioned for the spring musical and landed a supporting role that had her practicing songs in the shower every morning. But the approaching final custody hearing cast a shadow over their growing sense of security. Jake watched both girls navigate the uncertainty with remarkable grace, though he could see the strain in small moments. Rose's tendency to check and recheck her homework, Lily's habit of touching Emma's necklace whenever adults discussed legal matters. "Dad," Tommy said one Saturday morning as they worked in the garden together, "why do Rose and Lily's grandparents want to take them away from us?" Jake paused in his weeding, considering how to explain adult cruelty to a 6-year-old. "Sometimes people think they know what's best for others even when they're wrong. But Rose and Lily don't want to go with them." "No, they don't." "Then why don't the grandparents just leave them alone?" "Because some people care more about being right than about being kind." Tommy absorbed this information with the serious expression he wore when processing important concepts. "That's dumb." "Yes, buddy. It really is." That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Jake answered the doorbell to find a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. "Mr. Smith? I'm Dr. Sarah Chin, the court-appointed psychologist. I'm here to conduct the evaluation ordered by Judge Martinez." Jake's stomach tightened. He'd been dreading this moment, the clinical assessment that would determine whether his family was psychologically healthy enough to stay together. "Of course. Please come in." Dr. Chin spent the next 3 hours interviewing each family member separately, then observing them together during what she called natural family interactions. Jake watched her take notes as Tommy showed Rose and Lily his latest rock discoveries, as Naomi helped Lily practice her songs for the musical, as Rose patiently explained her science project to anyone who would listen. "Mr. Smith," Dr. Chin said as she prepared to leave, "I'll be submitting my report to the court next week. I want you to know that in 20 years of family psychology, I've rarely seen children who are more articulate about their own needs and more secure in their family relationships." "What about the grandparents' claims that the girls have been coached?" Dr. Chin smiled slightly. "Rose and Lily's responses to my questions were consistent, detailed, and emotionally authentic. Children who've been coached typically give rehearsed answers that lack genuine feeling. These girls spoke from the heart about their experiences and their choices. And their rejection of their grandparents is entirely consistent with their trauma history and their understanding of abandonment. Children who've been given up for adoption often struggle with trust, especially when biological relatives reappear after years of absence. Rose and Lily's wariness isn't pathological, it's protective." After Dr. Chen left, Jake found Rose in her room, working on homework with unusual intensity. "How are you feeling about the evaluation?" he asked. "Fine. She seemed nice. She actually listened to what we said instead of trying to twist our words around." "Are you nervous about the final hearing?" Rose set down her pencil and looked at him directly. "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I'm not nervous anymore. I was scared at first when we didn't know if you'd fight for us. But now I know you will, no matter what. And I know we belong here no matter what anyone else says." "What changed?" "Watching how you and Naomi handle things. You don't just tell us we're family, you show us every day. When Lily had that nightmare last week, Naomi sat with her until she fell back asleep. When I was stressed about the debate tournament, you helped me practice my arguments for 3 hours. That's not what people do when they're just being nice. That's what parents do. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. You're right. That's exactly what parents do. And Dad? Even if something crazy happens and the judge makes the wrong decision, we'll still be your daughters. Legal papers don't change that. The wisdom in Rose's words amazed him. This 12-year-old had learned truths about family that many adults never understood. The week before the final hearing brought one last surprise. Jake's attorney called with news that made him smile for the first time in days. The Rodriguezes have made a tactical error, she said. They've filed a motion claiming that your household is too chaotic and unstable to properly raise the girls. How is that good news? Because they've requested that the judge visit your home to see the unsuitable conditions for herself. They're so convinced that they're right, they want Judge Martinez to witness your family dysfunction firsthand. Jake looked around his living room, where Tommy was building a fort with couch cushions while Rose helped Lily memorize her lines for the musical. Naomi was in the kitchen, humming as she prepared dinner, occasionally calling out encouragement to the kids. When does she want to visit? Tomorrow afternoon. Jake, this could be the best thing that's happened to your case. Let Judge Martinez see what your family actually looks like. The next day, Judge Martinez arrived at 4 p.m., just as the family was settling into their after-school routine. She declined Jake's offer of coffee and instead asked to simply observe the family's normal activities. For the next hour, she watched Tommy excitedly show Rose his latest rock collection editions while Lily practiced piano in the background. She observed Naomi helping Rose with algebra while Jake reviewed Lily's English essay. She saw the easy affection between all family members, the way they naturally included each other in conversations, the comfortable chaos of a household where 5 people genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Mr. Smith, Judge Martinez said as she prepared to leave, the Rodriguez's attorney described your home as chaotic and unstable. I'm curious about their definition of those terms. What did you observe, Your Honor? I observed a family. A real family with all the beautiful messiness that entails. Children who feel secure enough to be themselves, parents who are actively engaged in their children's lives, and a household where love is demonstrated through daily actions rather than grand gestures. And the girls? Rose and Lily are thriving. They're confident, articulate, and clearly bonded with all family members. Whatever trauma they experienced in their early lives, they're healing from it here. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Jake looked around the table at the faces that had become his whole world. In less than a week, a judge would decide whether they could stay together or whether Robert and Margaret Rodriguez would succeed in tearing apart the family that had formed through crisis and grown through love. Dad, Lily said, interrupting his thoughts, you look worried. Just thinking about the hearing next week. Don't worry, Tommy said with 6-year-old confidence. We're a real family. How can you be so sure? Jake asked. Because, Naomi said, reaching across the table to take his hand, real families don't break apart just because some people don't understand what love looks like. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who had chosen to love him and whom he had chosen to love in return, Jake knew she was right. The final custody hearing arrived on a crisp Monday morning in late October. Judge Martinez's courtroom was packed with observers, social workers, family advocates, and several reporters who had followed the case since news broke about the father who discovered his daughters through a medical emergency. Jake sat with Rose and Lily at the defendant's table, watching Robert and Margaret Rodriguez enter with their legal team. The elderly couple looked smaller somehow, diminished by weeks of failed legal maneuvers and public scrutiny of their choices. Their confident righteousness had been replaced by the desperate determination of people who knew they were losing but refused to surrender. Your Honor, the Rodriguez's attorney began, my clients maintain that these children would benefit from the moral guidance and religious instruction that only their grandparents can provide. Mr. Smith, while well-intentioned, lacks the spiritual foundation necessary to raise children who have already experienced significant trauma. Judge Martinez looked skeptical. Counselor, I've reviewed Dr. Chen's psychological evaluation, observed the family in their home environment, and listened to extensive testimony from both girls. What evidence do you have that Mr. Smith's household is inadequate? The children's rejection of their own grandparents demonstrates a concerning lack of respect for family authority and traditional values. Or, Jake's attorney interjected, it demonstrates healthy boundaries and the ability to recognize manipulation when they see it. Robert Rodriguez stood suddenly. Your Honor, may I address the court directly? Judge Martinez nodded. You may. Robert's voice carried the practiced authority of decades in the pulpit. Your Honor, I've served God and my community for 40 years. I've counseled troubled families, guided wayward youth, and dedicated my life to moral instruction. These girls need the stability that only a God-fearing household can provide. Rose stood before anyone could stop her. Your Honor, may I respond to that? Rose, you don't need to, Jake began. Yes, I do. Rose turned to face Robert directly. Mr. Rodriguez, you say you've spent 40 years serving God and your community. But what about serving your own family? What about serving your daughter when she needed you? What about serving your granddaughters when we needed you? Robert's face flushed. Young lady, you don't understand the complexities. I understand that you forced our mother to choose between the man she loved and her family. I understand that when she died, you threw us away rather than admit you were wrong about our father. I understand that you've spent 12 years living comfortably while we struggled, and now you want to take credit for our recovery. Rose, please sit down, Judge Martinez said gently. Your Honor, may I finish? Because I want Mr. Rodriguez to understand something. Rose's voice grew stronger. You talk about moral instruction and traditional values. But the most important value I've learned is that love isn't about control or judgment or making people conform to your expectations. Love is about showing up when someone needs you, even when it's inconvenient. Love is about sacrifice and commitment and putting someone else's well-being before your own reputation. She gestured toward Jake and Naomi. These people have shown me what real love looks like. They didn't take us in because we were convenient or because it made them look good. They took us in because we're family, and family doesn't abandon each other. Margaret Rodriguez dabbed at her eyes. Rose, honey, we're family too. We're your blood. Lily stood beside her sister. Blood doesn't make family. Choice makes family. And you chose not to be our family 12 years ago. We were grieving. So were we, Lily said quietly. We were grieving our mother, our adoptive parents, every foster placement that didn't work out. But we never gave up on the idea that somewhere, someone might actually want us. Judge Martinez studied the papers before her, then looked up at both legal teams. I've heard enough testimony. The psychological evaluation clearly indicates that Rose and Lily are thriving in Mr. Smith's custody. The home visit confirmed that they're living in a stable, loving environment. Most importantly, both girls have consistently and articulately expressed their preference to remain with their biological father. Robert Rodriguez stood again. Your Honor, children don't always know what's best for them. Mr. Rodriguez, Judge Martinez interrupted, these aren't typical children. Rose and Lily have survived abandonment, foster care, medical crises, and family separation. They've demonstrated remarkable maturity and insight throughout this process. I'm inclined to trust their judgment about their own well-being. She picked up her gavel. Therefore, I'm granting full legal custody of Rose Carter and Lily Carter to their biological father, Jake Smith. Furthermore, I'm terminating any parental rights or claims by Robert and Margaret Rodriguez. The adoption proceedings may begin immediately. The gavel came down with a decisive thud that seemed to echo through Jake's entire being. It was over. His daughters were officially, legally, permanently his. Rose and Lily hugged each other first, then turned to embrace Jake and Naomi simultaneously. For a moment, they stood in a tight family circle, holding on to each other and the magnitude of what they'd just accomplished. Congratulations, Smith family, Judge Martinez said warmly. I have a feeling this is going to be a very happy ending. As they left the courthouse, Jake noticed that Robert and Margaret Rodriguez had already disappeared, their legal team packing up with the efficient movements of people eager to distance themselves from a losing case. Are you okay? He asked the girls as they reached the parking lot. We're perfect, Rose said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. We're finally, officially, legally perfect. What happens now? Lily asked. Now we go home, Jake said simply. And we start the rest of our lives as a real family. 5 years had passed since that life-changing phone call, and Jake stood in the same hospital where everything began, but this time as a volunteer coordinator for the Rare Blood Donor Program. He'd made it his mission to ensure that no other father would miss years with his children because of bureaucratic failures or family secrets. At 17, Rose had grown into a confident young woman who carried Emma's grace and Jake's determination. She'd been accepted to study pre-law at 3 prestigious universities, her personal statement focusing on family rights and the legal protections needed for children in the system. Her acceptance speech for the school's humanitarian award had brought tears to Jake's eyes when she thanked her family for teaching her that justice wasn't just about winning, it was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Lily, now 17 as well, had discovered her calling in social work after volunteering with children in foster care. She spent her weekends at the County Family Services building, the same place where she'd once endured those painful visits with her grandparents, now helping other kids navigate the system that had failed her for so long. Her supervisor often commented that Lily possessed an unusual ability to connect with children who'd lost trust in adults. Tommy, at 11, had become the family's official storyteller, documenting their journey in photo albums and scrapbooks with the same methodical attention Rose once applied to medical records. His middle school presentation about how families are made had won the district competition, focusing on the idea that the strongest families are often the ones that choose each other. "Dad, are you ready?" Rose appeared in the hospital lobby, her volunteer badge hanging around her neck. She'd started working with the pediatric social work team, helping families navigate medical crises while dealing with complex custody situations. "Ready for what?" "The Rodriguez case. Remember? The family meeting we've been preparing for?" Jake's stomach tightened. After 5 years he'd thought he was done with that name. "What Rodriguez case?" "Maria Rodriguez. She's 8 years old in foster care, and her biological father just found out she exists. Sound familiar?" Jake followed Rose to the family conference room, where a young man sat across from a social worker, his face showing the same mixture of shock and determination Jake remembered feeling 5 years ago. "Mr. Rodriguez," Rose said, settling into her chair with professional composure, "I'd like you to meet Jake Smith. He went through something very similar to what you're experiencing now." The young father looked up, his eyes filled with the desperate hope of someone who just discovered his world was bigger than he'd ever imagined. "They told me I have a daughter. That she's been in foster care for 2 years while I had no idea she existed." "What happened?" Jake asked gently. "Her mother and I broke up when she found out she was pregnant. Her family convinced her I wasn't ready to be a father, that she'd be better off handling it alone. When she died in a car accident, they gave the baby up for adoption without telling me." Jake felt the familiar anger at adults who played God with children's lives, but also something else. The satisfaction of being able to help someone navigate the system that had once seemed impossible to him. "The good news is that you found out," Jake said. "The better news is that there are people who will fight for you and your daughter." "How do you know?" Rose smiled, the same determined expression she'd worn in Judge Martinez's courtroom 5 years ago. "Because we've been there. And we know that love doesn't give up, even when everything seems impossible." Over the next hour, Jake and Rose shared their story, the medical emergency that revealed hidden children, the grandparents who'd tried to steal them away, the legal battles that had tested every bond they'd built. But most importantly, they shared the lesson that had sustained them through it all. "Family isn't about blood or biology or who raised you from birth," Rose explained to the young father. "Family is about who shows up when you need them most. Who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. Who chooses to love you every single day not because they have to but because they want to. And sometimes," Jake added, "the most beautiful families are the ones that form in crisis, grow through adversity, and prove that love is stronger than any force that tries to tear it apart." As they left the hospital that evening, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Emma's secret hadn't just cost him years with his daughters, it had led him to understand that the most precious things in life often come disguised as disasters. The phone call that had shattered his quiet Tuesday morning hadn't just saved Lily's life. It had revealed that his heart was bigger than he'd ever imagined, that his capacity for love could expand to embrace children he'd never known existed, and that the strongest families are often the ones that have to fight for the right to exist. "Dad," Lily said as they drove home, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten sick? If the hospital had never called you?" "I try not to think about it," Jake admitted. "It's too painful to imagine you and Rose still out there somewhere, thinking you were unwanted." "But maybe it happened exactly the way it was supposed to," Rose suggested from the back seat. "Maybe Emma knew somehow that her secret would eventually lead us home." "Maybe she did," Jake agreed, thinking of the woman who'd given him the greatest gifts of his life even in death. That night, as the Smith family gathered for their traditional Sunday dinner, Jake looked around the table at the faces that had become his whole world. Rose was explaining her college plans to Tommy, who listened with the rapt attention of a little brother who thought his sisters could do anything. Lily was describing her latest success story from the foster care center, her voice animated with the satisfaction of meaningful work. Naomi smiled as she listened to their children, all 3 of them, share their dreams and discoveries. "You know what I realized today?" Jake said during a quiet moment in the conversation. "What's that?" Naomi asked. "Emma's story didn't end when she died. It continued through Rose and Lily. Have you ever discovered that your greatest challenge became your greatest blessing? That the moment you thought would break you actually made you stronger than you ever imagined possible? Share your story of unexpected grace in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more tales that celebrate the extraordinary power of love to transform ordinary lives into something magical. Because in the end, we're all just one moment, one choice, one act of courage away from discovering that our story is far from over. It's just beginning to become everything it was always meant to be.